best part. That's a lot. And yeah, I did sue David. The whole band did. You guys familiar with the David Live album that we did at the Tower Theater? That album, I'm amazed that it actually turned out as good as it did, because that was pretty much at the beginning of the tour. I think we were only on the road for a month or two when we recorded that. And I didn't know we were recording. We weren't told we were recording. Herbie Flowers, who is, I mean, to me, the premier British bass player, and has been since the late 60s. He was a good 10 years older than me, and he'd been around the block. He played with T-Rex and people, and he actually played on earlier of David's stuff. Well, he played on Diamond Dogs, he played on Space Oddity. Anyway, Walk on the Wild Side, you know, Lou Reed. He was amazing. Well, he had enough, you know, behind him where he could see what was going on. And so he confronted the management about it, and they offered us a really piddly fee. And he refused on our behalf. And they would not play ball. They just said, it's a take it or leave it thing. Well, take it or leave it. What if we just really left it and just didn't show up at the gig? That didn't go over very well. And what went over even worse is when he went to David's dressing room to tell David we weren't going to be going on stage that night unless he agreed to what we wanted. And I didn't see it, but I heard it. Because I was down the hall in a different dressing room, and David was screaming, there was shit bouncing off the walls. And Herbie came out, I thought he was going to come out all bloody, but he wasn't. And he came out and he said, I got the money. So David agreed to pay us what we asked, which was basically a reasonable price, you know, in the dollars of 1974. And when the date came to be paid, which was I think 2 weeks later, we didn't get paid. And we let that go for a couple more weeks, and finally then they refused to pay it, so we sued them. And we were on the road we were still doing gigs in this big lawsuit. And it was fine. We were fine. David never said anything about it. The lawyers were just doing their jobs. And we won. And we got paid a few months later. But it did cost Herbie his job. And it cost the drummer, Tony Newman, who was his mate, his job. And a few other people actually got fired. I guess I skated through, because in their mind they figured that new kid couldn't have caused all that shit. I didn't, but I was there. But that's the kind of stuff that I learned early on, which in hindsight has helped me my whole career, because it wouldn't be the last time that something like that happened. Something happened like as what was it? Geez, last year. It still happens. You know, at least this time I can see it coming though. And I'm Herbie now.
And then, of course, you went on to record on Young Americans and Station to Station. And can you just explain to us what it was like working in the studio with David?
After we did the Diamond Dogs tour, and we did, you know, with all the big set and all that stuff, which is a shame because that thing was never properly documented. Out of all the things I've done with David, when I went to see the Bowie exhibit at B&A here, they had some footage I hadn't seen before, but there's really not much of it. So after that ran its course, we moved on because he was already writing songs for Young Americans. I mean, back then, artists would do 2 albums a year, not like 1 album every 3 or 4 years. So he was already on to the next record. So we were testing this stuff out live. And because it was gone into the American R&B soul area, and we recorded it, a lot of it, as Sigma Sound with like Barry White and a lot of the soul groups were, which is a Philadelphia studio, we ended up calling it the Philly Dogs tour, which was the second half of the Diamond Dogs tour. And recording the record was done in between gigs. We'd have days off, and we'd be on the East Coast near Philadelphia, and we'd go to the studio and record. And then when we finished the tour, we finished off recording the rest of it. And you know, he had the material written, so it went as a normal record would go. And it did, out of all of his albums, it did quite well on release. And so, fast forward, God, even less than a year after that was released and we were back in the studio again, recording what would end up becoming Station to Station, which the record company expected Young Americans Part 2. Because, hey, look at this. He's done Hunky Dory. He's done Ziggy. He's done Diamond Dogs. He's done Aladdin Sane. They've done quite well. But Young Americans did really well. Fame went to #1. The album sold a lot. So they wanted another one. So they told David they wanted another one. It was not a good idea. So we go in the studio with half-written material and make the weirdest record he's ever made. I mean, we were gluing that thing together in the studio. He had ideas, and he had the basics of the songs, but these songs, lyrically and musically, were not that. And it was David's FU record. It's like, don't tell me what to do. Now I'm going to make a record so weird that you're not going to know what to do with it. And if anybody here has the album and has heard it, the title track alone is enough to rattle the record company. It's a 10-minute long song that starts with a sound effects record. That's where we got there's a train at the beginning. We put this record on and he just recorded it. And then we put a bunch of feedback guitars on it. Anything you could do to piss off the record company. And by default, the thing sold really well, and in hindsight, it's really not a weird sounding album. In the day it was. It pushed the envelope, you know, when it was recorded and released, but by today's standards, and by things he had done later, it doesn't. But that was a whole different process. We went from one album where we had songs that were all written and ready to go to a record, which were pretty much normal songs. They had, you know, some love song lyrics, a little bit of politics in there, some social things. Where Station to Station was so cryptic. I mean, if you listen to that thing, it's like, there's some pretty weird lyrics on that. And so it was all extremes with David. There was never any continuity. Actually, the only continuity that we ever had was the way that we worked was that we weren't reading music. It was an exchange of ideas, and he was very brilliant at pulling. He knew what you did well, and that's what he wanted you to do. But he had a way of taking that and making it even better. He could pull it out of you. He had a talent for that, and that is a talent to get the musicians to perform at top level without doing it through like intimidation, like you have a heavy-handed boss, because, well, nobody likes that. You know, I don't care what you do for a living, you got a heavy-handed boss, it's going to backfire most of the time. So he knew better, and I don't think it was his mindset anyway. So that was, you know, recording with David was fun. And for the later albums we did all the way up to the next day, the method of recording, or let's say, the method of how we related and worked together never really changed. And that's what made it always pleasurable and also got the best results.
You're talking about, obviously, Station to Station. It's got your guitar player stamped all over it. It's such a great record. You play amazingly on it. I think everyone will agree. How was it to not be on the tour that was the Station to Station tour? Because you were in the band, you made this amazing record, then suddenly you're not in the band anymore.
You know, along with every great record and every good relationship you have with the band, there's always a manager. Yeah. And here it comes again. The next managers were just, what was it? What did you say? About the new boss and the old boss?
Yeah, meet the new boss.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss? Yeah, same shit. Different guy, different name, same guy in essence, same idiot. And anyway, there were a lot of problems caused, again, in the financial areas. And I left. And I didn't officially quit because I couldn't get David on the phone, and the management were being less than cooperative. They sent me a plane ticket to go to rehearsals, and I took it, cashed it in, and I flew somewhere else. And didn't show up. So I really don't know.
Was that brave or stupid, do you think?
I'd like to say it was brave, but it was friggin' stupid. I mean, brave would be you quit first. But then again, how could you quit if you can't get the guy on the phone? That was always my excuse. Sorry, man, I couldn't quit because I couldn't find you. But no, it wasn't the smartest thing I ever did. No, and it wouldn't be the last time I did something like that. It's, you know, we didn't get business degrees along with the, you know, learning how to play the guitar. That's for sure. And that's where the biggest mistakes always got made anyway. It always had to do with the business because we so much love what we do, and we're lucky in that way that not everybody's happy with their work or the jobs that they have to do. Now, I'm not saying that every gig I've ever taken has been the ultimate, that I loved it, and forget the money, but just the job itself. But, you know, in general, I love what I do, and when you really love what you do that much, you tend to put your time and energy into that. Because I play my guitar at home, or sitting in a hotel, or even with some friends who are making a record that may not have some money, I do it anyway. It was never really about the money. It became about the money later on because I realized, you know, somebody got to pay my bills, and that's me. So I've been fortunate enough to do that, you know. It all comes down to the end of the day that they want you to work for the least amount of money they can get you to work for, you don't. So long story short, we did have a money problem. I did sort of quit the band. And then we didn't speak again until 9 years later. And when he again lost a guitar player and needed a replacement.
In the interim,
I must be good enough to at least take over, right? I mean, Christ.
in the interim, of course, you worked with someone else who was pretty famous, and I think it's quite poetic that you see the Beatles on TV in 1964, the Ed Sullivan Show, and then in 1980 you end up working with John Lennon. So was that because you've worked with him previously during Young Americans?
Yeah, let me see, I left the Bowie camp in early '76 and didn't work with him again until '83, so I did do a lot in that period of time. One of the things was working with John Lennon on his last 2 albums, Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey. And again, that came as a result of being in Bowie's band, because when John had taken 5 years off, from 75 to 80, because his son Sean was born, and he wanted to spend at least a good 5 years with him before he went back out on the road and, you know, spent months and months on end in the studio. And so when he decided to do it, he hired Jack Douglas to produce the record, who had produced some of his earlier works. He was involved with the Imagine record and a number of other things, and also with Aerosmith and Cheap Trick. Jack's a great producer. And so he had Jack put the band together and asked him to find certain people, and one of them was me, which at the time, it took me a minute to figure out why. And he had remembered when we did the Young Americans album that he wrote Fame with David, and he played guitar on it, as I did. And we recorded a Beatles song on Young Americans that John wrote, and Across the Universe. And so John remembered us working together, and that's why I got hired. But the weird thing was, that the first day that we showed up at the studio, I went and said hello to John and introduced myself as if I'd never met him before, because I didn't remember. Which was, it's still funny because, you know, there's certain things in your life that I've forgotten some major shit. Okay, granted, I might have been a little compromised at certain points in my life, and there may be blanks, little blanks, big blanks, but that's one thing that how do you forget that? You think you're meeting John Lennon for the first time, he told you otherwise, then you argue about it. And I'm thinking to myself, you're an asshole. This guy is the guy in that band that the girls were screaming at was the one guy in the band that you related to the most. Apparently you've worked with him before. I mean, you have a credit on the same album and they're right next to each other. And you're in the studio at his request to play the record. He may be right. You know? I never did ask him how high I was at the time, because something tells me in 1975 he might have been in the same condition I was, only his memory worked better. So that's, you know, and along the way, during the record was kind of funny because every once in a while, we got on really well. He was a much different character than most people, because he was way more down to earth and more of just, he didn't like being the center of attention at all when we were working. He liked it, like he felt like he was part of the group of a band. Probably, you know, because, I mean, Bowie, the Elvises and the Bowies and people like that, they didn't spend a lot of early years in bands. They became solo artists in their own right, much younger. Where, you know, folks like, you know, the Lennons and the McCartneys, George Harrisons, and, you know, guys, frontmen like that, they spent the majority of their younger years or the beginnings in the context of a band. So he was more comfortable being just a band member, you know, and it'd be funny every once in a while, out of nowhere, I'd hear over the mic to remember me now. and it was good. It was a good, fun running joke, and yeah, good memories about all that stuff, you know. And you know, there's plenty of other stuff, God, that I've done that, you know, I've done solo records. I've come back and forth in and out of Bowie's band. I've worked with some people that I've loved to work with. You know, I actually got my blues on by meeting Buddy Guy about 6 years ago, who was another guy I idolized when I was a kid. And I just met him by chance at his blues club in Chicago called Legends. And he invited me to play, and I've done dozens of sit-in nights with Buddy over the last 5 or 6 years. And I'll be going back there to Chicago in just coming January for a week, because Buddy's 83 and on the road 10 months out of the year. His idea of a vacation is January. He stays home in Chicago, but he plays at his club 4 nights a week. And he invites people, you know, that he's met that he likes to come in, and I get invited, and I love doing that. And that's the beauty of this whole business. Sure, I mean, if you've been lucky enough to make all kinds of money and do what you want to do, but I know guys that have plenty of money and they're plenty miserable. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting around smiling all day, unless you need to see a shrink, maybe, you know. Don't trust the guy that's sitting around smiling all day. It's not, yeah. But I've been fortunate enough that through my travels through life and this business, I've actually not only met, but I've been on stage with, or played with, or recorded with. Even some of them were just a day. Some of them were a bunch of days. But the people, a lot of the people that were instrumental in my development as a guitarist and a person and a performer, I've been able to do that with. And it still blows my mind. I mean, I still turn into that little kid again. Like when the first time a buddy guy invited me to play, I was 12 again. And I was like, wow, how cool is this, man? And I like that, though. I don't ever want to be that guy. I think the day that I turn into the guy that goes, oh yeah, that buddy guy, it's this guy, I think it's time to leave, you know? Because I love getting excited like that. And I look at it this way. If there were no buddy guys, and no Lennons, and no Keith Richards, and no Chuck Berrys, there wouldn't be no me. They started this whole thing. As a matter of fact, if there was no Chuck Berrys and no buddy guys, there wouldn't be any Rolling Stones. There wouldn't be any Beatles, you know? It all goes back and back and back. And each generation takes what they have. They give it to the next generation, they get the ball, they carry it.
And then we give it all away for free.
Yeah. And then you meet managers and lawyers and it just turns to shit.
We're rapidly running out of time in this little section, but I wondered if you'd mind doing a quick fire round quickly. We did this the other day.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah? I'm just going to fire some things at you and just give me a quick answer.
We're going to do word association now. And after this we'll be playing Scrabble. Yeah.
Alright, so number one, Ian Hunter.
Ian Hunter, All the Young Dudes. I worked with Ian in 1977. We made one record. We toured through Europe and England. Oh, before we did the tour, we recorded the record, burned the house down we were staying in, finished the record, fired our manager, and the band broke up. Next.
Blue Suede Shoes, 1985.
Blue Suede Shoes, I was invited to come to London to do a tribute to Carl Perkins because I was working with a band that had lead rocker and some Phantom from the Stray Cats in it called Phantom Rocker and Slick, who had worked with Carl Perkins and Dave Edmonds, who was on the show. And then when I got here, it was like really cool because Eric Clapton was on the show and all in the same band, and George Harrison and Ringo. And it was really cool, and the best part was we did a tribute to Carl while he was alive. He didn't have to die first. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is great for that. Let's induct the guy, and as soon as he dies, we'll do a tribute. Well, how about doing it when he's breathing?
David Coverdale.
David Coverdale was singing in Deep Purple the first time I heard of him. And then he's had a band named Whitesnake, and while I was on hiatus, which I won't get into yet, we'll talk about in the Q&A, he contacted me up in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and asked me to do a Whitesnake tour, which I was absolutely astounded because I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't know why he asked me either, because I don't know. I don't think I play like that. And anyway, it was pretty cool. We did one record together, released it on a very small label, and then nothing happened. Then I moved along and went back with David again.
The New York Dolls.
The New York Dolls. Wow, I went all of a sudden through all of that, and I'm in a punk band, which actually led me. No, I actually worked with Glenn Matlock before that. You're probably going to say Matlock, but I just got it. I wanted to work with David Johansen, who grew up in the same neighborhood as I did, but we never even knew each other until 2011, when they needed a replacement guitar player. I took the job, mainly because it really wasn't because of the Dolls, because I really wasn't a Dolls fan. I was a Johansen fan. And it was only a 6-month tour, so I took it. We did a really fun tour, and after it was all done, because that was the end of the Dolls, I've remained friends with David to this day, and he's one of my closest mates.
Okay, Carfire.
Carfire. This is a really good way. If any guy out there is having a hard time getting a job, light something on fire. It really works. In 2012, I was in New Jersey doing a blues gig or something, and I have a friend, he's a surgeon, and he builds things. Airplanes, real ones that he flies, cars, he does everything. So he had built, you guys know what a Cobra is? Yeah. Okay, he builds a kit Cobra. And, oh, let's go for a ride.